Anyway, turn to the book of Matthew chapter 17. Matthew chapter 17. Brother Donnell gave us the reason for the Mount of Transfiguration, for the most part, the Mount of Transfiguration last week. We asked the question. The last verse in chapter 16 is referring to this occurrence. The issue of the Mount of Transfiguration is we don't really know everything. I've read several commentaries. We did some studying last night. No one knows everything about the purpose for this. But when I teach and preach, I try to bring it down on somewhat of a practical level and not get too theological. But that's what we're going to look at. We're not going to look at Mark chapter 9 and Luke chapter 9 where the other accounts are. But Matthew gives the most complete account of this situation. And after 6 days, verse 1, Jesus taketh Peter, James, and John his brother, and bringeth them into a high mountain apart, and was transfigured before them. And his face did shine as the sun, and his raiment was white as the light. And behold, there appeared unto them Moses and Elias. That's the New Testament version of Elijah. Talking with them, and Peter. Now notice one commentator pointed out that Peter was not asked to speak here. Peter did what he does a lot. He spoke unprovoked. And then answered Peter and said unto Jesus, Lord, it is good for us to be here. If thou wilt, let us make here 3 tabernacles, one for thee, one for Moses, and one for Elias. And while he yet spake, notice how the Lord just kind of interrupts him. The Lord can break in anytime he wants to. And while he yet spake, a bright cloud overshadowed them. Now, how can a bright cloud overshadow you? Normally a cloud blocks out the light. A bright cloud overshadowed them, and behold, a voice out of the cloud which said, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear ye him. And when the disciples heard it, they fell on their face and were sore afraid. And Jesus came and touched them and said, Arise and be not afraid. And when they had lifted up their eyes, they saw no man save Jesus only. And as they came down from the mountain, Jesus charged them, saying, Tell the vision to no man until the Son of Man be risen again from the dead. And his disciples asked him, saying, Why then say the scribes that Elias must first come? And Jesus answered and said unto them, Elias truly shall come first and restore all things. But I say unto you that Elias is come already. And they knew him not, but have done unto him whatsoever they listed. Likewise shall also the Son of Man suffer of them. Then the disciples understood that he spake unto them of John the Baptist. Now we're going to stop here for right now. Now, just by way of discussion, let's get some theologians in here. We got the Bible college dean in here, and we got Brother Dewey in here, and Brother Rowland's in here. But what is the? Let's talk about this and what's the significance of this is a little more. Brother, where's Brother Ron? Brother, who can I get? Brother Gret, get the mic if you would, sir. Get the mic if you would, and let's talk about this a little bit. What is the significance of this, and what is the meaning of this, as it were? Who wants to start us off? All right, take the mic to Brother Donnell. The Bible doesn't really give a whole lot of explanation for this for this very unusual and very exciting, if you will, occurrence.
Most directly, it fulfills, at least in part, what he had said in verse 28 of the previous chapter.
Yes, sir.
I mean, do we need a lot more than that?
But what do you? But I mean, let's just discuss it. I mean, we're not going to do any injustice to Scripture. What do you think this did for the disciples? What do you think? I don't mean you, unless you want to comment on it, but speaking to the whole crowd, what do you think this did for the disciples? All right, Brother Gret.
It solidified their belief that Jesus was God himself.
Okay, all right. Brother Joe Jones.
Luke 1:17. And he shall go before, this is John the Baptist, incidentally, what was said of him.
Okay.
And he shall go before him in the spirit and power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of the fathers to the children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the just, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord.
All right.
He wasn't Elijah, but he come in the same power.
All right, Brother Matt Herrera. What do you think this did for the mindset of the disciples? Brother Herrera.
I never really noticed this before, but I think it was something you said about brightness and clouds. But it reminds me of when Moses asked to see the glory of the Lord, and he put him in the cleft of the rock. Do you suppose, and this is probably just all speculation, but do you suppose that he put the cloud there because the full Shekinah glory would have killed them?
Okay, I guess that's possible. We know that we can't bear the full glory of the Lord, but there is. Notice now that Moses took 3 people with him. There was 3 people. There was 2 other people that went with Moses in the Old Testament version of this, you might say. But it was Abinadab and Abihu in it's at Exodus 24. But they were only allowed to see part of what went on. James and John were allowed to see the full transaction. So there is a comparison there. But James and John were allowed to see the full transfiguration. All right, I saw another hand. Whose hand did I see? I thought I saw another hand. Yes, Miss Kelly. Miss Kelly. Bring the mic up here to Miss Kelly.
I believe it emphasized to them things concerning his resurrection, because they didn't see him in the resurrected body until after he was raised.
Okay.
But in verse 5, when it talks about the bright light, if we've ever seen a little cloud up in the sky and the sun, and it goes over the sun, you can just see it all around that little cloud. The cloud is not important. And you cannot look up and see the face of God, but the cloud protected them from that.
Yes, ma'am. All right. Those are all good. Brother Card. Brother Card.
One thing that amazes me is that they recognize Moses and Elijah.
Yes, sir.
They didn't have no pictures back then.
Yes, sir.
But see, when we come into the kingdom, we'll be known as we are known. So we'll know everybody.
All right, that's good. I did notice that. All right, I'll get to you in a minute, Joe, but we're gonna, I got some comments for you here, but we see there's theological things that we can debate. You know, Moses was there to represent those that represent those that would die and be raised, that have died and are going to be raised again to go into the kingdom. And Elijah represents those who are going to go into the kingdom without death. And we can speculate all those things that you find in the commentaries, and maybe that's true. I don't have anything better for you than that. That sounds theological. Maybe that's true. But practically speaking, listen, things were about to get rough for the disciples. Things were about, they were about to see their leader. They were about to see their leader, someone that they loved, someone they loved on a human level. They ate with him. They talked to him. They walked with him. And they were about to see him horribly beaten and disfigured and spit on and rejected in a visceral, violent way. It was going to be done in a gleefully violent way. And after all that, he's going to be crucified. So he gave them a glimpse that there's something else coming. Yeah, I'm going to have to go. I'm going to have to go through the beatings and the being spit on and the crown of thorns. But there's something else coming. And bear in mind, this is the same reaction that John had again some 80 or so years later, or it was several decades later, that at least 50, that when he saw Christ in his glorified state in the book of Revelation chapter 1, and he recognized him, by the way. He recognized him. But he fell down on it. He fell down on his face, and Christ touched him and commissioned him to write the book of the Revelation. And see, these disciples, all the disciples are important. Remember this, and I try, anytime I discuss the disciples, anytime I discuss the apostles, I try to remember that their names are going to be on the 12 stones of the foundation of the New Jerusalem. So we need to be very careful when we criticize the disciples. But there was a learning curve in the Gospels. But this was the group within the group. Peter was going to be very active on the day of Pentecost. Peter was one of the primary apostles, you might say. And John's going to write the book of John, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, and the St. John and Revelation. And of course, 1st, 2nd, 3rd John deal with Christ as God in the flesh. The whole book of John it's not a synoptic gospel, as they say. It's a supplement gospel, and it deals with Christ being God in the flesh. And a commentary that I read last night said that John 1:14, when it says that the Word became flesh and we beheld His glory, is referring to this account. It's referring to the Mount of Transfiguration. But these were the disciples that were gearing up to do some major things. But they were going to have to go through some valleys before they got there. They were going to have to go through some trials. And Christ here is giving them a glimpse of, this is what the end's going to be. The end is going to be an eternal kingdom. See, we got the 1,000-year millennial kingdom, then we go do some other stuff, but there's going to be a kingdom for eternity. And Christ is going to rule and reign on the throne of David for eternity. And he gives them a glimpse of this, possibly to encourage them for down the line, because it made an impression on them. And as much of an impression as this made on Peter, when Peter brought it up in 2 Peter chapter 1 or 2, I never can remember, verses 20 and 21, he says, as great as it was to see that, this book is worth more. As great as it was to see that this book that we have is worth more. So here's what we could take from this. There's going to be trials and tribulations. People get discouraged. I told somebody the other day, my wife and I were talking, and I said, well, some people don't have enough sense to get depressed. I said to get depressed, I said to be depressed, you got to have a little bit of sense. You got to think past the end of your nose to be depressed. These people that don't think more than an inchworm, they don't have anything to get depressed about. They don't have anything to be worried about. And see, these people that want to dismiss depression, you better be careful. You better be careful when you start doing stuff like that. When you start saying that certain diseases don't exist, and you start and see, it sounds spiritual when you say things like, all you need is Jesus. And by the way, the Bible will fix any problem. The Bible will fix, but there are situations where people need help. I've been foolish enough to say in the past that all prescription medication is unnecessary. You know, that's a stupid thing to be saying. Prescription medication to do with how to manage your mood and manage depression. Listen, there are people who have legitimate needs. And we ought not to dismiss those needs, because the Bible says to sit where they sit. The Bible says to weep with those who are weeping. But people get down. People get discouraged. People get tired. The body and the mind work together. If your body consistently has a problem, then it may eventually affect your mind. But Jesus here, it could be that he simply gave them some encouragement. He knew they were going to need a boost. Can you imagine looking at somebody that you admire and watching that person be tied to some kind of a rock or some kind of a tree or some kind of a post and be beaten to the point that you can see their insides? Can you imagine watching? Listen, there are men in here that I admire. There are several men in here that I have some respect for. And to watch those men be tortured, to watch them be tortured, that'd be rough. And it could be that Jesus is reminding, because he's been telling them. He's been telling them. He shifts after 13. He shifts from discussing the kingdom to discussing, this is what's going to happen. And it wasn't that it was a plan B. It's just that now that he had to wait for things to transpire in his providential plan. He had to wait for things to transpire to get them ready for it. Then he started telling them what's going to happen. He tells them in this chapter what's going to happen. So he's been telling them. But he gave them a little glimpse here. Listen, don't let the middle. Here's what we have to remember. I have to remind myself of this. Todd Patrick's phrase is that I'm the chairman of the hand-wringing society. That's what he's told me. But we have to remember, we don't need to let the middle get us down. See, I told Brother Owen before, I know how it's going to end up. I'm worried about the middle. I'm not worried about the end. We can't let the middle get us down. See, he gave them a glimpse. This is who I really am. This is who I'm going to be for eternity. Right now, I'm serving a purpose. I'm the sacrifice for all mankind. It was established before the foundation of the world. But this is what's coming. This is what's coming. And he also, there's some other things between the Old Testament and the New Testament that may have been an implication there. He's kind of bridging the gap. You got kind of a similar situation goes on with Moses. And this is a better version of that. A better version of that. But can you imagine if John and Peter had just decided, I'm not going to work today. I'm not going to work today. They would have missed out on that. Listen, what we have to make ourselves do, and I say we, what we have to make ourselves do is when we don't want to read the Bible, and when we don't want to study, and when we don't want to do anything of a spiritual nature, we just want to sit and marinate in our problems. That's when we need to read the Bible the most. That's when we need to pick up the phone the most and get some godly counsel. Listen, when we call somebody, let's call somebody that's got some sense. And you know what you can do to make sure you're always on the right track? Call the pastor. Call the pastor. Now he's a man. He's a man like, well, he's not a man like me, but he's a man. He's a little bit better a man than I am. But we're all human. We're all human. There is no temptation overtaking us, but such as is common to man. One of the fellows years ago at Second Chance, he said, that verse doesn't make any sense to me. He said, Jesus was never tempted with crack. I said, no, but he was tempted with addiction. He was tempted with problems of the flesh. He was tempted with problems of the ego. He was tempted with problems of the mind. He was tempted in things of a sexual nature. All your basic temptations that are going on today, your major categories, were going on 2,000 years or 6,000 years ago when earth was created. What did Eve say the fruit was? Or what did the Bible say the fruit was? It was good for food, pleasant to the eyes, and able to make one wise. All your basic temptations are the same. There's no temptation overtaking us, but such as common to man. What the devil wants us to do is, he wants us to find the wrong coping mechanism. That's what he wants us to do. He wants us to find the wrong coping mechanism. You know what I do a lot of times? I take stuff out on my wife. I just find a reason to get upset. I take stuff out on my kids. I'll just decide to go to bed. I won't read the Bible. I won't study. I won't pray. What the devil wants us to do is he wants us to find the wrong coping mechanism, and he wants us to use that same coping mechanism over and over and over and over again until we're totally neutralized. And don't think that it doesn't happen once you get saved. Don't think it does. See, Jesus gave these individuals some encouragement because he knew they were going to need it. And I personally, I think it's just that practical. I think it's just that practical. He knew what was coming, and he knew what they were going to, because he knew their part in this is important. Look at the books look what Peter did. Jesus knew Peter had a problem with being up and down. He knew that Peter had a problem with up 1 minute and down the next. Up 1 minute, down the next. He makes the declaration of Christ in chapter 16 for the whole group. He speaks for the whole group. In my opinion, he's a spokesman for the whole group there. They all believe that. None of them stepped up and corrected Peter and said, well, I don't believe that. So in my opinion, he's a spokesman for the whole group there. And what's happening in the next few verses down? Jesus is calling him Satan. So Peter had problems, and Jesus knew that. He knew how vital John would be, so he gave them the encouragement they needed. But the point is, they were at the right place to get it. See, you have to go to the right place to get it. You have to go to the right place to get it. Sam Mayhew has been a grown-up since he was about 12. He's 8 years younger than me, but he's taught me a lot of things. And Sam said, well, Brother Ken taught me the first thing you have to do to be successful. Anybody know what it is? You got to show up. The first thing you have to do to be successful is show up. Now, that's the rest of it. You know, Brother Ken, he's got like 10,000 slogans. You show up on time. People say, I tell my students, people say, well, if you're on time, you're late. No, if you're on time, you're on time. Just be on time. If you're on time, you're on time. That's the first thing you got to do is be on time. You show up on time, you show up dressed to play. Wearing the right attire, in the right state of mind. But imagine if that day, Peter and John just said, you know what? I'm just tired of this. Look what they'd have missed out on. See, we have to program ourselves. Well, I don't want to read my Bible. That's when you need to read it the most. I don't want to call the pastor. That's when you need to call him the most. I don't want to pray. That's when you need to pray the most. But they were where they were supposed to be, doing what they were supposed to be doing, and look at the glimpse they got. They got a glimpse of Christ in his glorified state. Now, Brother Stone, way back a long time ago, you had your hand up. Bring the mic to Brother Stone, Brother Gret.
It's worthy to make note here in verse 5. While he yet spake, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and behold, a voice out of the cloud, which said, This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Hear ye him. The next verse says, when the disciples heard it. So they understood. The note I'm trying to make here is they understood the voice from heaven. It wasn't gibberish. It was an understandable language.
All right, that's good. All right, so if there are all right, brother, bring the mic to Brother Dewey.
Isn't it significant that that when the cloud overshadowed Jesus, they saw Jesus only? God said, This is my beloved Son, hear him. Peter's statement was to build 3 tabernacles. That's tabernacles not to not a tent to live in, but a worship center.
Yes, sir.
And so the thing that they needed most was just to pay attention to Jesus and to worship Him only. You know, He's the only one. And as far as Him being the only, the idea here is worship, and Him being the only one worthy of worship.
You think Peter knew that nobody knew where Moses' grave was? Doesn't the Bible say, doesn't the Old Testament say that God buried him in a way where nobody knew? Well, if that's the way God did it, it's pretty obvious that God wouldn't want a tabernacle built for him at this time. You know, but who am I to question Peter? I don't have a lot of sense either sometimes. Sometimes there's people, and I've been guilty of this. I say there's people. I'm one of those people. But there's people that they have trouble with silence. They feel like they have to feel the silence. They have trouble with just sitting there and not saying anything. I happen to be, if you can believe it now, I happen to be one of those people. Especially if I'm around somebody who intimidates me. If I'm around somebody, okay, I know this person outranks me by a mile. Well, I have trouble because I don't want to feel like I'm wasting that person's time, you know. But I have trouble just being quiet. Well, Peter here, probably, I would have got a little nervous myself. I look up and there's Jesus in His glorified state with Elijah and Moses standing there with Him talking. That would have rattled me a wee bit. So he's just trying to come up with something to say. And he apparently was pretty far off the mark, if you read the account. But look, what we can take away from this, because I don't know all the theological reasons this happened. I don't know anybody else does either. But just to keep it on a practical basis, this had to have been, we know this was a source of encouragement for them because they bring it up again. They bring it up years later. They bring it up well after the resurrection. This is that Jesus is showing them yet again, He's showing them this is how it's going to end. Yeah, there's going to be some problems. Listen, if you're saved, if you know Christ as your Savior, you know what you need to try to do? You need to serve the Lord. We need to serve the Lord, keeping eternity in view. We need to keep, listen, I was thinking to myself the other day, we got a 30-year mortgage, but we said we set up a plan to pay it off sooner. So, because if we pay it off according to their schedule, they're going to make $100,000 profit off of us. They're going to double their money on us if we. So we said, okay, we can pay it off. But I was thinking to myself, in 30 years, I will be 73 years old. What am I doing? 73 years. What happened? I was 20 years old 2 weeks ago. What happened? You know, now I got my kids are laying on the bed with me, asking me if I like to be fat. And I'm saying, man, what happened? But you know, you know what I got to do? I got to look at what the Lord's given me. I got to look at what the Lord's done for me. I got to serve the Lord in appreciation. I got to serve the Lord in thanksgiving. You can't be carried away by all that stuff. What do they call it? A midlife crisis? Is that what they call it? Of course, I got married too late for that, I think. We didn't get married till what? We were 33 when we got married, 35 when we had our first kid. And I got Carson telling me he wants a little brother. I said, man, you crazy. I said, we'll get you a dog. You're crazy. You have no idea what kids cost. Dad, I want a little brother. No, you can't have a little brother. Don't even be speaking that. Don't even be saying that. I said, we'll get a fence around the backyard and we'll get you a dog. But we have to focus on our responsibilities, because one of the primary ways, you know what we need to keep in mind? I wish my daddy had thought about this years back when he was having trouble. You know one of the primary ways we serve God, serving our families. I am the head of my family. Now, sometimes the head might be empty. Sometimes I might make some bad decisions, but I'm the head of my family. And if I'm not, let me tell you how emphatic I am about this now. If I'm not serving my family in a biblical way, I'm not serving God. I might be preaching every week. I might be teaching every week. But if I'm not serving my family in a biblical way, I'm not serving God. God instituted the home before He instituted anything else. People balk at that. I have no problem emphatically stating that. God instituted the home before He instituted anything else. And I'm not diminishing the local church at all. I'm not diminishing at all. You bring your family to the local church. You serve God through serving the local church with your family. That's how it works. But one of the primary ways that I serve God is through serving my family. And sometimes it's going to get rough, and it's going to get tough, and it's going to get hard. And it's my job to seek out wise counsel, to take responsibility for my own choices, and to find coping mechanisms that are right and biblical and that work. And if I'll go to this book, it's okay to go to the book with the pastor. It's okay to go to the book with my wife. It's okay to go to the book with other people in the church that I trust. But I need to go in this book by myself. I need to get in this book by myself. And I need to find things that work. And I need to go on and on and on until whatever happens, happens, whether I'm raptured out or whether I die. Because guess what I got to look forward to? I got to look forward to seeing Christ in His glorified state, a member of the kingdom. I am a member of the kingdom right now. Right now. Not later on, right now. That's what I am, a child of the King. I'm a member of the kingdom. I am one of His children. And that is what I have to look forward to. But sometimes when I'm climbing on or off my tub seat, or I'm looking at a stack of bills, I don't feel like a child of the kingdom. And I don't want to read my Bible. And I don't want to pray. And if I do call Brother Rowan, I'm only calling him up to complain. And he's so nice about it. He'll say stuff like, well, brother, I've kept you long enough. Real polite, more polite than I'm used to. Well, brother, I've kept you long enough. Well, what we need to do is we need to enjoy the book. And people say to me all the time, people say, well, if I read the Bible, I had a family member told me this just the other day. So, well, if I read the Bible, I'll just be doing it out of obligation. What's wrong with that? You brush your teeth out of obligation. I hope you do. Well, if no point in brushing them, I'll just be brushing them out of obligation. Well, we appreciate it. We appreciate it. No point in taking a shower. I'll just be taking a shower out of obligation. Well, keep on taking them. We do other things listen, if you'll do it out of obligation and you'll ask the Lord to help you, He'll give you the desire back. If you'll read your Bible, have devotion with listen, there's nothing like, I'm in there watching a TV show, and my boy busts through my office door and says, Daddy, aren't we going to have devotion tonight? Makes you feel about that big. I don't want to have devotion. If I want to have devotion, I'd be in there. I want to watch TV. But you know what we do? I pause it. I don't turn it off now. I pause it. I'm going to come back to it. I'm just being honest with you. I pause the TV show and go have devotion. All right, brother, take the mic to Brother Donnell, Brother Gret.
There's a verse in another angle of what you're talking about, 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 7, every man according as he purposeth in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loveth a cheerful giver. Similar to what you're saying in principle, some people say, well, I don't feel like it, and so forth, so I won't give because God loveth a cheerful giver. That's the backwards way of looking at it. You go ahead and give, and you fix your cheerfulness.
Yes, sir. And it's funny how they don't say that when it comes to giving time to their employer. Well, I'm not going to work today because God loves a cheerful giver, and I wouldn't be able to give my hours cheerfully. That's not how we do it. It's not how we do it. Listen, if we will read and study, and you say, Brother Paul, how did we get off on this? Because I believe that Christ gave those disciples that vision for their encouragement. Now, it helps that I read that in a commentary, but I also believe that. I believe, practically speaking, because we're not told exactly why this happened. I believe, practically speaking, he gave them that for this reason, but they were in the right place. Those disciples were in the right place. You have to be in the right place. You have to have a desire to want to succeed. After what I saw my father go through, listen, it is dangerous to think for 1 second. I'm going to say this and I'm going to close. It's dangerous to think for 1 second that I'm above it and that I'll never lose my family. That's dangerous. We can make decisions on our own, that cost us everything, and I've seen it happen. And if you've been in ministry any length of time, so have you. So let's be where we're supposed to be, doing what we're supposed to be doing, and allow God to encourage us. Jeremiah says, he says, I know the thoughts I have for you. Thoughts of good and not evil. When I get down that verse, because I've used that verse to help other people, he says, I know the thoughts I have for you. God is, I know what the plan is. I know the thoughts I have for you, thoughts of good and not evil, to bring you to an expected end. So as church members, let's remember, let's not criticize people. Let's not make light of people's issues and problems. Let's not talk about what we know. Let's sit where they sit. Let's weep with those who are weeping. And let's do our part to encourage one another. I'm going to ask Brother Kevin Adderby to stand and close us in prayer if you would, sir.